He offered to share his sleeping bag with the alien women. What she did next was unexpected. The frozen wind cut through the small valley like sharp blades. Snow had been falling all day, and the landscape looked like a vast, endless white desert. Eli Carter, a human survival specialist, trudged forward, each step heavier than the last. His boots were thick, insulated, and made for this kind of terrain, yet the cold seemed to find every tiny gap in his gear. He had been walking for hours, trying to locate the emergency shelter that the survey team had marked earlier. Behind him, a faint, almost imperceptible sound echoed against the jagged cliffs. At first, Eli thought it was just the wind whistling through the rocks, but then he noticed the shape in the snow, a figure, delicate and hunched, moving awkwardly. Eli's first thought was that it was another stranded human, but as the figure drew closer, he realized the truth. She was not human. Her skin shimmered faintly, almost like it reflected the cold light of the twin moons above. Her eyes were large, almond-shaped, and glowing faintly in the dim light, reflecting colors that didn't exist on Earth. She moved with an elegance that contrasted sharply with her obvious discomfort. Eli's instincts told him to approach carefully, but something in her posture suggested fear rather than threat. "Hey," he called, trying to sound calm, though his voice cracked slightly from the cold. "Are you okay?" The alien woman paused and looked at him, her glowing eyes widening in surprise. She tilted her head in a way that reminded Eli of a curious child, trying to understand something completely unfamiliar. Eli stepped closer, keeping his hands visible, making no sudden movements. I am Sakira," she said finally, her voice melodic but strained. Every word seemed like a struggle against the cold that enveloped her. "This place, it is too cold for me." Eli's heart sank. He had been trained to handle extreme weather, but he knew enough about alien physiology from prior research to understand the problem immediately. Sakira's species had evolved on a planet with scorching deserts and blazing sun. Her body was built to withstand heat, not the freezing temperatures of this exomoon. Exposure to such cold could be fatal. "You can't stay out here," Eli said, urgency rising in his chest. "You'll freeze in minutes. Come with me. I know a shelter not far from here." Sakira's eyes flickered with doubt. "Shelter, humans use strange things I do not understand." Eli nodded. "I'll explain later, just trust me for now." Step by careful step, they moved toward the faint outline of the emergency shelter. Eli noticed that each of her movements seemed slower than it should have been. Her limbs trembled, and her breath was visible, crystallizing instantly in the frigid air. He realized that she could barely stay conscious for much longer. Finally, they reached the shelter, a small metal cabin partially buried in the snow. Eli pushed the door open, and warm air, preserved from the emergency heaters, rushed out to greet them. Sakira's eyes widened in awe. She had never experienced warmth like this before. The sensation seemed almost alien to her. Eli quickly turned on the internal heaters, watching as the temperature inside slowly climbed. Sakira sank to the floor, her body shivering violently despite the warmth beginning to fill the room. Eli glanced at her, feeling a mixture of worry and determination. He opened his backpack and pulled out his sleeping bag. It was insulated with advanced thermal material designed for human survival in extreme cold. Eli knew it wouldn't be enough for both of them if she were to stay outside, but there was one solution. "Sakira," he said carefully, "I have one sleeping bag left. You can use it to warm up." She looked at him in confusion. "Sleeping bag, what is this? Is it safe?" "It's safe," Eli said with a reassuring smile. "It's like a small, warm room you can wrap around yourself. It will keep you from freezing, but there's only one. You can have it or we can share it." Sakira's eyes widened further. Sharing a personal space like that was unheard of in her culture. She instinctively shook her head, moving back slightly. "No, that is not proper. I cannot be so close." Eli shook his head. I know your rules are different, but this is about survival. If we both stay alive, we can figure out everything else later. I can handle the cold better than you, trust me." Sakira studied him carefully. His eyes were steady, his posture calm despite the freezing conditions outside. Something about his confidence made her hesitate. Finally, with a cautious nod, she agreed. "Very well, I will trust you." Eli smiled. "Good choice." He unrolled the sleeping bag and invited her in first. Sakira slipped inside, her form small and fragile against the massive human-sized bag. The moment her body touched the warmth, a visible relaxation crossed her features. Eli noticed the slight color returning to her cheeks, or what passed for cheeks on her species. As she settled in, Eli joined her, careful to keep as much distance as possible while still providing shared warmth. The bag was tight and the space limited, but the cold outside didn't matter anymore. For the first time since landing on the exomoon, both of them could breathe without the constant bite of frost in their lungs. Hours passed as the wind howled outside. Eli told stories of Earth, mountains, oceans, sunsets, and even simple things like the taste of warm soup. Sakira listened, fascinated by the concept of humans surviving harsh conditions not through natural adaptation, but through invention, cooperation, and perseverance. "I do not understand," she said finally. "Your species is not strongest, not fastest, not most advanced, yet you survive. Even here in this frozen place you endure." Eli shrugged, smiling faintly. "We survive because we care. We take risks for each other. That's how we last." Sakira tilted her head, absorbing his words. She had been trained to survive on her own, to rely only on her physical abilities. But this human way of endurance was different. It relied on trust, empathy, and courage, all qualities she had seen but never understood fully until now. The night dragged on. The storm outside intensified, snow lashing against the metal walls of the shelter. Sakira shifted slightly, murmuring in her language, and Eli realized she was trying to communicate something important. "What is it?" he asked. You stay awake. Even as I warm, you risk yourself." Eli laughed softly. "I've been through worse storms than this. Don't worry about me. I'm more worried about you." She studied him with those wide, glowing eyes, and Eli felt a strange connection forming, one that transcended species, culture, and the cold that surrounded them. It was something human and universal, the instinct to help, protect, and endure for another being. By the time the first hints of dawn touched the horizon, the storm had eased slightly. The temperature inside the shelter was manageable, and Sakira's strength was slowly returning. She looked at Eli with gratitude mixed with something else, curiosity, awe, and the faintest hint of something deeper she had never felt before. You saved me," she said quietly. "Not because I am important, but because you chose to." Eli nodded. "Sometimes survival isn't about being strong. It's about choosing to act even when it's hard, even when it's risky. That's how humans live and thrive." Sakira didn't respond immediately. She simply studied him, as though trying to memorize every line of his face, every nuance of his voice. For her species, physical proximity and warmth were deeply personal. But Eli's simple act of sharing a sleeping bag, of putting her survival above his comfort, had shifted something inside her. As the light grew stronger, the exomoon's frozen landscape stretched endlessly before them. Yet inside the small metal shelter, a different kind of warmth had taken root, one that transcended temperature, species, and distance. It was trust, understanding, and the faintest spark of admiration. And Eli knew, without fully realizing it, that this night was just the beginning. The frozen exomoon had tested them both, but the real journey, the journey of trust, courage, and discovery, was only starting. The cold outside would continue to rage. The challenges ahead were uncertain. But for the first time in this harsh, alien world, two beings, human and alien, had found warmth together. And that warmth, fragile as it was, might just be strong enough to carry them through the days to come. The cold had eased slightly outside the metal shelter, but the wind still whistled through the rocks, sending shivers through the exomoon's frozen landscape. Inside, the warmth of the sleeping bag had given both Eli and Sakira a reprieve from the relentless cold, yet the silence between them was filled with unspoken thoughts. Sakira sat quietly, her body still wrapped in the human-sized sleeping bag. She was regaining strength, but something deeper had shifted. She kept glancing at Eli, studying his face as he moved around the small cabin. For her species, sharing a confined space, especially with a stranger, was an act reserved only for the closest of bonds. And yet here she was, sharing warmth with a human who had offered it freely, without hesitation, without fear, simply because he saw her in danger. Eli noticed her gaze. He smiled softly. "Feeling better?" he asked. Sakira hesitated before answering. I am warmer, stronger. But this closeness is unusual. For me, I do not know." Eli nodded, understanding the weight of her words. "I know it's not how your people do things, but sometimes you have to put survival above tradition. I promise it's safe here." She studied him, her glowing eyes wide and cautious. "Safe, yes, but trust is unusual. You risked yourself." Eli shrugged, trying to appear casual, though the truth was that he had stayed awake most of the night, constantly checking her temperature, listening to her breathing, making sure she didn't slip into hypothermia. "Humans, we survive by helping each other. That's how we last. You do not need to understand it fully to accept it." Sakira looked at him in silence, her thoughts racing. On her home planet, acts like this were rare. Altruism, helping someone outside your immediate family or group, was almost unheard of. It was considered unnecessary, even foolish. And yet here was Eli, risking discomfort and danger, doing it without expecting anything in return. She could feel a strange warmth, not just from the sleeping bag but from the act itself. She took a cautious step closer. "You humans strange. You survive not only by strength but by choice." Eli smiled again. "Exactly, we choose to act, we choose to endure for others, that's the difference." For the first time, Sakira truly looked at him. Not as a human, not as a stranger, but as someone who had chosen her life over his comfort. It made her reconsider everything she had learned about survival and strength. She had always believed that survival was about skill, about physical ability, about personal resilience. But Eli's actions suggested something else, something deeper, something she did not fully understand yet. The storm outside began to die down further, leaving only the faint hiss of melting snow and the distant echo of shifting ice. Inside the cabin, Eli moved to check the emergency supplies. He had brought extra rations, water packs, and medical kits, but he also carried something else, a small device capable of generating heat for extended periods. It was meant for emergencies, but he now realized that Sakira's body might need it more than his own. "Here," he said, handing her a small thermal pack. "This will help you recover faster, just hold it close." Sakira took it, examining it curiously. Her fingers brushed his as she received it, and a faint spark of energy passed between them. She froze for a moment, startled. Her species could sense subtle energy flows, a kind of biosignature that humans were mostly unaware of. That brief contact had registered as something profoundly personal. Your energy different," she said softly. Eli tilted his head, slightly puzzled. "Energy? You mean warmth?" Sakira shook her head. "Not only warmth, life. You give it willingly, not forced, not expected, but freely." Eli nodded, trying to hide the flush that crept onto his cheeks. "It's what we do. If you need help, we give it. That's how we survive together." There was a pause. The two of them sat in silence, listening to the faint hum of the emergency heater. Then, unexpectedly, Sakira did something that startled Eli. She reached out and touched his hand lightly. He froze for a moment, unsure what to do. In her culture, this would have been an extremely personal gesture, almost sacred. "Sakira," he began carefully. I do not know how to respond," she said, her voice soft, almost a whisper. "But I wish to show respect, gratitude, and understanding." Eli's eyes widened slightly. "You don't have to, you're safe now." "No, I must," she insisted. And then she did something remarkable. Sakira closed her eyes and activated a small part of her bioenergy reserves. Normally, these reserves were used only for rituals, bonding with her own kind, or survival under extreme conditions. They were deeply personal, rarely shared with outsiders. Yet here she was, transferring a small portion of her energy to Eli, an act of trust and reciprocity that defied her cultural norms. Eli felt a warmth spread through him, not from the sleeping bag, not from the heater, but from Sakira herself. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, yet profoundly comforting. He realized what she had done and looked at her in awe. "You didn't have to do that," he said quietly. "I wished to repay your kindness," she said. Her voice trembled slightly. "In my world, such things are rare, but you deserve it." Eli shook his head, smiling. "I don't need repayment, but thank you, it means a lot." They sat like that for a long time, the human and the alien sharing warmth, trust, and a growing understanding that crossed the boundaries of species. Outside, the first light of the twin moons reflected off the ice, casting the cabin in a soft, pale glow. Inside, another kind of light was forming, the light of friendship, respect, and recognition of something bigger than either of them alone. Eventually, Eli spoke again. "Sakira, when the storm ends, we'll need to move. The emergency rescue team will scan for our location, but until then we need to stay prepared. Do you think you can handle that?" Sakira nodded slowly, still absorbing the night's events. "Yes, I will try. I trust your knowledge, your guidance. I feel safe with you." Eli felt a sense of relief and pride. Not only had he kept her alive through the freezing night, but he had also begun to bridge the vast gap between human and alien understanding. It was something he had never anticipated when he joined the survey mission, and yet it was exactly the kind of connection that made life in space meaningful. Hours passed, and the storm outside finally broke. Snow still fell, but the winds had calmed, revealing the stark, icy landscape of the exomoon. Eli prepared a small, warm meal from the rations, careful to include extra nutrients for Sakira. She ate slowly, still fascinated by the flavors and textures, commenting softly on each one. "Salt from Earth, edible and strange, but good," she said with a small smile. Eli chuckled. "You'll get used to it. Earth food is strange at first, even for humans sometimes." As they finished the meal, Eli looked at Sakira, feeling a strange sense of responsibility, not just for her survival but for her understanding of humanity. "You know," he said, "you've already shown a lot of courage. And more than that, you've shown something important, that trust can exist, even between species that seem completely different. That's how we humans survive. That's how we thrive." Sakira considered this carefully. "Trust and endurance choices, these define humans more than strength alone," Eli nodded. "Exactly. And tonight you've seen it firsthand. Humans endure because we care. We act even when it's hard. And sometimes that's what makes the biggest difference." Sakira's eyes glowed faintly, a subtle reflection of both the cabin light and the understanding forming within her. "I begin to understand. Not fully, but enough to see humans are remarkable." By the end of the day, both of them had regained some strength. The sleeping bag, now empty, lay beside them, a silent witness to the night of shared warmth, trust, and discovery. Outside, the exomoon remained harsh and unforgiving, but inside, a small sanctuary had formed, a place where differences didn't matter, where life was preserved through choice, courage, and empathy. Eli looked at Sakira and smiled. "Tomorrow, we'll start planning the next step. But for now, rest. You've earned it." Sakira nodded, curling slightly as she adjusted to the residual warmth. For the first time since leaving her home world, she felt something that could not be measured in degrees or survival rates. A sense of belonging, a fragile but growing connection with another being who had risked everything simply to help. And Eli realized that this was only the beginning, not just of their journey across the frozen exomoon, but of something much larger, a bond that could change the way two species understood each other, one act of kindness at a time. The storm had passed completely now. The winds were gone, leaving only the faint, eerie stillness of the exomoon's frozen landscape. Outside, jagged ice cliffs reflected the light of the twin moons, turning the snow into a shimmering expanse of silver and blue. Inside the small metal shelter, Eli and Sakira had settled into a routine of careful recovery. The first rays of artificial warmth from the emergency heater had melted the last of the frost clinging to Sakira's skin. Her breathing was steadier and her shivers had lessened, but Eli noticed she was still tense, as if her body could not fully relax. He understood. She was far from home, in an alien environment, and had just experienced something no one from her species would ever do, sharing a confined space with a human. Eli moved carefully around the cabin, checking the supplies. He had planned their next step. They needed to reach a communications outpost where the survey team could locate them, but the path would be treacherous. Snowdrifts blocked parts of the terrain, and patches of ice could collapse underfoot. Despite the danger, Eli wanted to make sure Sakira was fully recovered before attempting the journey. "You should eat something," he said, offering her a ration pack. "Even a little will help your energy return." Sakira studied the food curiously. "Humans eat many things even in cold for strength," Eli chuckled softly. "Yes, we need fuel for our bodies. Without it, we can't survive harsh conditions. Even a little goes a long way." She accepted the food, eating slowly, savoring the warmth and the flavors. Her species had evolved to survive on minimal energy in hot climates, so the cold had drained her more quickly than it would have a human. Eli watched her carefully, noting how each bite seemed to restore not just strength, but a sense of calm. Once she finished, he sat down across from her. "Sakira," he said gently, "tonight I want you to rest completely. You've been through a lot, and tomorrow we need both of us strong. The trip to the communications outpost won't be easy." She nodded. "I understand." "But will you sleep?" Eli hesitated. He had stayed awake most of the previous night to ensure she survived, and exhaustion was heavy in his limbs. But he knew the moment he closed his eyes completely, he might not notice if she slipped back into danger. "I'll rest," he said finally, "but I'll stay alert enough to help if you need it." Sakira tilted her head, her glowing eyes reflecting a mixture of curiosity and admiration. "You, humans, endure, not because forced, but because choice to help. Unusual, powerful." Eli smiled softly. "It's what we do. Survival isn't just about strength. It's about willingness to care, to act, and sometimes to sacrifice." Hours passed quietly. Sakira's eyes drifted closed, but Eli remained alert, sitting nearby and watching her rise and fall with each breath. He noticed something remarkable. She was beginning to display signs of recovery far faster than he had expected. The warmth, the food, and the energy transfer she had performed earlier had accelerated her recovery. But there was something else at play, a subtle mental shift. She was starting to see humans not just as another species, but as beings capable of extraordinary empathy and courage. Suddenly, she stirred, murmuring softly in her melodic language. Eli leaned closer, listening carefully. You endure for me for trust, not for fear, not for gain," Eli nodded quietly. "That's right. I act because I choose to. I don't expect anything in return. That's how humans survive. That's how we thrive." Sakira's eyes opened fully, glowing faintly in the dim light. She reached out, brushing her fingers lightly against his arm. The gesture was almost ceremonial in her culture, a sign of deep trust and connection. Eli felt a warmth spread through him again, not from the sleeping bag or the heater, but from the simple act of shared energy and trust. "I must," she whispered, "show gratitude, respect, understanding." Eli shook his head gently. "You don't have to. Your life is enough repayment. Surviving tonight, that's the greatest gift." But Sakira insisted. She activated her bioenergy again, transferring a small measure of her vitality to him. It was subtle but noticeable. Eli felt stronger, more alert, yet also aware of the profound trust she was placing in him. For her species, such acts were deeply personal, reserved for the most sacred bonds. That she had done this for him, a human, was extraordinary. "You give freely and now I repay freely," she said, her voice trembling slightly. Eli reached out, placing a hand over hers. "It's not a repayment, it's mutual respect. We've helped each other survive, and that's enough." A silence fell between them, deep and comforting. Outside, the exomoon's frozen world remained harsh and unforgiving, but inside the small shelter, a new kind of warmth had formed, one that could not be measured in degrees or calories. It was trust, understanding, and the beginnings of something neither had experienced before: connection across the gulf of species. As night deepened, Eli realized that their bond had changed something fundamental in Sakira. She had witnessed firsthand what humans could endure, not just the cold, but the willingness to act for another being without hesitation or fear. It was not strength that defined humans, it was choice, courage, and compassion. Hours later, as dawn's faint light began to touch the shelter, Sakira spoke again, her voice soft but filled with quiet conviction. "You humans endure because choice, trust, empathy more than strength alone." Eli nodded, smiling. "Exactly. And tonight you've seen it for yourself. That's how we survive together." She tilted her head, as if trying to memorize every detail of his face, every word, every gesture. "I begin to understand, not fully, but enough to respect humans." Eli's smile widened. He felt a strange satisfaction, not just for survival, but for the understanding that had begun to grow between them. He had started to teach her something important, not through lectures, not through force, but through action, through shared experience. Eventually, both of them rested, lying side by side with the residual warmth of the sleeping bag still present. Eli kept one eye open, ready to respond if danger appeared, but for the first time in hours, he allowed himself a brief moment of calm. Outside, the twin moons cast a pale glow over the ice, illuminating the exomoon's jagged landscape. It was a harsh, unforgiving world, but inside the shelter, life persisted. Not just survival, but hope, trust, and the quiet recognition of shared humanity. Eli looked at Sakira and spoke softly, almost to himself. "Tomorrow we start moving, but tonight we rest. We've earned it." Sakira's eyes closed, but she held onto his words, storing them carefully. For her species, understanding humans would take time, but tonight had been a revelation. She had witnessed courage, empathy, and the extraordinary ability to endure, not through physical strength, but through choice, trust, and connection. And Eli knew this was only the beginning. The exomoon was still dangerous, and the journey ahead would test them both in ways they could not yet imagine. But something crucial had already formed. A bond that could bridge the gap between human and alien. A bond built on warmth, trust, and the simplest yet most powerful human quality of all: care for another being. As the first hints of sunlight reflected off the ice, both of them slept, bodies recovering and minds processing the night's events. Outside, the frozen world waited, indifferent and challenging. Inside, a new story had begun, one of survival, courage, and the quiet power of humanity shining through the cold. And for the first time, Sakira felt something extraordinary. Not just survival, but belonging, hope, and trust in a species she had barely begun to understand. The next morning, the exomoon's landscape glimmered under the twin suns' faint light. Snow had settled into crisp, sparkling layers, and the frozen cliffs reflected pale blue and silver. Eli woke first, his body still tired from the previous night, but alert. He knew the day ahead would be challenging. They needed to reach a nearby communications outpost before the weather shifted again. Sakira stirred beside him, her glowing eyes slowly opening. She looked at Eli, and for the first time he noticed a subtle change in her expression. It was more than gratitude. It was curiosity, reflection, and something deeper. The night had left its mark. Her species had witnessed humans endure, act, and survive not through sheer strength, but through choices rooted in empathy and courage. And now she seemed to be considering something extraordinary herself. Eli unrolled the sleeping bag, offering a hand to help her to her feet. "Feeling stronger?" he asked. Sakira nodded slowly. "Yes, stronger, but my energy, I feel different." Eli raised an eyebrow. "Different how?" She hesitated, her glowing eyes meeting his. "Last night I shared a small portion of my energy with you. It is unusual for my kind. Yet I feel compelled to do more now." Eli blinked, slightly surprised. "Do more?" "You don't have to. Whatever you've done is already more than enough." Sakira's gaze hardened with resolve. "No, you saved me, gave warmth, comfort, risked yourself for me, freely. I must respond in a way my species never does for an outsider." Eli could sense the weight in her words. He had seen enough of alien cultures to know this would be an unprecedented act. "Sakira, I don't want you to put yourself in danger. It's enough that you're alive, please." She shook her head. "This is not danger. This is choice. And I choose to act in kind." Eli nodded slowly, understanding that she was about to do something remarkable. He watched as Sakira concentrated, her glowing eyes intensifying. A subtle aura began to surround her, faint at first, then growing stronger. Eli recognized it as a bioenergy surge, a phenomenon he had studied but never experienced firsthand. "Sakira, what are you doing?" he asked gently. "I give more of my energy to you to protect, to strengthen, not just body but spirit," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "In my culture, this is sacred only for those we trust completely, never outsiders. But you earned it by choice, courage, care." Eli felt a rush of warmth spread through him, not just from the energy itself, but from the trust behind it. It was profound, almost overwhelming. He realized that her act was far more than physical assistance. It was a bridge between species, a declaration that trust and empathy could exist even in the harshest environments. "Sakira, I don't know what to say," he whispered. It's incredible. You saved me. I repay in the only way my species understands as sacred trust, life bond," she said, her glow brightening. Eli felt stronger, more alert, yet also deeply connected to her in a way words could not capture. Hours passed as they prepared for the journey. The snow outside had settled into a stable layer, though the winds were still biting. Eli carried their supplies, ensuring Sakira could conserve her energy. Her body had regained much of its strength, but he noticed she moved differently now, deliberate, measured, almost purposeful. "You feel different," Eli said carefully as they stepped outside. "Your energy, it's stronger than before." Sakira glanced at him. "I am stronger, yes. Not just physically, but mentally, emotionally. Last night, your actions, your endurance choice inspired me. I understand humans more than before." Eli smiled. "It's amazing how much a single night can teach both of us, isn't it?" She nodded. "Yes, one night, yet it changed everything in me. I see courage, trust, and empathy as strength, perhaps the greatest strength of all." The journey to the communications outpost began slowly. Snow crunched underfoot and the icy cliffs reflected a blinding glare. Eli led the way, occasionally helping Sakira over difficult patches. She adapted quickly, her alien physiology allowing her to navigate treacherous terrain with grace, but her mind was sharper now, guided by the lessons of trust and human endurance. As they moved, Sakira began to speak. Eli, humans survive because you act not only for yourself but others. Your species inspires loyalty, trust, courage, even in strangers. Eli nodded, pleased that she was processing these lessons. Exactly. Humans survive together. Alone we can endure, but together we thrive. And sometimes that choice to help another is stronger than any weapon, any skill, any physical power. Sakira's gaze drifted to the frozen horizon. I wish my people could see this, understand what humans truly value, not only strength, but choice, empathy, endurance for others. Eli smiled faintly. Perhaps they will someday. For now, we focus on surviving, reaching the outpost, and proving that trust and courage can save lives in ways no weapon ever could. Hours passed as they traversed the icy terrain. The exomoon's harsh environment tested them constantly. Hidden ice patches, sudden snow drifts, and freezing winds. But the energy Sakira had shared gave Eli endurance beyond what he expected. Her bioenergy didn't just support him physically, it sharpened his senses, cleared his mind, and bolstered his resolve. Sakira moved beside him with quiet determination. You humans act, even when difficult, even when cold, harsh, even when risk great, yet you continue because choice, not instinct, not survival alone. Eli nodded. Exactly, survival alone is not enough. We survive together for each other, and that's what makes us strong. Finally, after hours of careful travel, they reached a high ridge overlooking the communications outpost. Eli scanned the area carefully. No immediate threats, no sudden changes in snow or ice. The outpost was small but functional, with solar panels and antennas designed to operate in extreme conditions. Eli felt a wave of relief. They had made it this far without major incident, and Sakira's extraordinary energy transfer had played a key role. You humans extraordinary, Sakira said quietly. Not only strong but enduring, courageous, willing to risk everything for others. I will remember this always. Eli smiled faintly, feeling the weight of her words. And I'll remember your courage. You've done something extraordinary too, sharing your energy, your trust. That's not easy for anyone, especially in your culture. Sakira's glow dimmed slightly, a sign that she had conserved her bioenergy after the prolonged transfer. Yet her eyes held something new: respect, understanding, and admiration. She had experienced humanity's greatest strength firsthand, choice born from empathy and courage. They approached the communications outpost carefully. Eli activated the emergency beacon, sending a signal to the survey team. While waiting for a response, they explored the small facility, ensuring it was fully operational. Sakira assisted instinctively, her keen intellect and energy abilities complementing Eli's human ingenuity. Together, they became an efficient team, united not only by survival but by mutual respect and trust. Hours later, the beacon confirmed receipt. Rescue drones were on their way. Eli and Sakira prepared to wait in the outpost, knowing the journey was almost over. But the time they had spent together, the shared warmth, the energy transfers, the mutual endurance, had formed a bond far stronger than either of them anticipated. You, humans, remarkable, Sakira said softly. I see your strength, not only physical but moral, choice, empathy, courage. You survive because you care for others. Eli nodded. Exactly. Humans endure because we choose to act even when it's hard. Sometimes that's what makes the biggest difference. Sakira looked at him for a long moment, her glowing eyes reflecting both moons. I will tell my people one day about this, about humans, about trust, courage, choice. Perhaps they will understand as I have begun to. Eli smiled, feeling a quiet satisfaction. This journey was not only about survival but about showing her the best of humanity. Courage, empathy, and the simple power of choosing to help another being, even when it costs you. As the first rescue drones appeared on the horizon, Eli and Sakira prepared to leave the outpost, carrying with them not only the memory of the harsh exomoon, but also the lessons of trust, courage, and shared endurance. They had survived together, endured together, and learned from each other. And though the future was uncertain, one thing was clear. Humanity's greatest strength was not weapons, nor speed, nor technology. It was the willingness to act for others, even against all odds. The rescue drones approached the communications outpost with steady precision, their lights cutting through the icy fog of the exomoon. Eli and Sakira watched as the mechanical figures descended, hovering above the snow with quiet efficiency. The storm had passed, but the frozen landscape remained harsh and unwelcoming, a sharp reminder of the challenges they had faced and survived together. Eli felt a sense of relief he hadn't allowed himself the night before. They were finally safe. The drones extended mechanical arms, preparing to transport them back to the survey ship in orbit. But before he stepped forward, he turned to Sakira. "You okay?" he asked. She nodded, her glowing eyes reflecting the lights of the approaching drones. "Yes, I am well. Stronger than I have been in a long time." Eli smiled faintly. "You did more than survive. You helped me too. That energy you shared, it kept me alert, aware." "It made a difference." Sakira looked down for a moment as though considering her actions. "I acted in ways my people would never expect. I shared energy life force with an outsider. Not necessary, but I chose to do so." Eli nodded, recognizing the weight of her words. Her species reserved such acts for the closest bonds, yet she had done this for him, an alien, a stranger. It was an extraordinary gesture, one that spoke volumes about her growing understanding of humans and their capacity for empathy. The drones lowered their transport pods, and Eli helped Sakira into one. She moved gracefully, despite the recent exhaustion, and settled into the pod with careful attention to the temperature controls. The warmth and stability of the pod ensured her recovery would continue during the trip back to orbit. As the pod lifted from the surface, Eli looked down at the exomoon, its frozen cliffs and snowfields stretching endlessly. He felt a strange mix of relief, pride, and curiosity. He had survived countless missions, endured harsh environments, but none had left him with the same profound sense of accomplishment as this one. Not because he had survived, but because they had survived together, and in doing so, had built something far more valuable than mere life: trust, understanding, and mutual respect. Once aboard the orbiting survey ship, Eli guided Sakira to the medical bay, where she could fully recover and regain her strength. The ship's advanced systems monitored her vitals, adjusting temperatures and energy levels to ensure optimal recovery. Eli remained by her side, keeping a watchful eye and occasionally offering gentle words of encouragement. "You humans, remarkable," Sakira said quietly, her voice soft but filled with awe. "I have seen courage, empathy, choice, endurance, not for self, but for others. Your species survives because of these qualities more than strength alone." Eli nodded. "Exactly. Humans endure because we choose to. Sometimes that choice is what saves lives." Sakira's glowing eyes fixed on him for a long moment. "I will tell my people one day about this, about humans, about your species' strength, not in force, not in speed, but in choice, trust, empathy. Perhaps they will understand as I have begun to." Eli felt a quiet pride. This was more than survival. This was recognition from an alien species that had never seen humans in this light. He realized that the events on the exomoon could have far-reaching consequences beyond just their own lives. Sakira's perspective of humanity had been forever changed, and that change could ripple across the galaxy. During the following days, as the survey team debriefed and restored the ship to operational status, Eli and Sakira shared more time together. They spoke about their worlds, their experiences, and the lessons learned from survival in extreme conditions. Sakira listened intently, her curiosity about humans deepening with each story. You humans endure challenges not by chance but by cooperation, trust, understanding choices made for others, she said thoughtfully one afternoon. I see now why your species thrives even in harshest environments. Eli nodded. Exactly. Alone, humans can endure. But together we thrive. And sometimes that choice to help another is stronger than any weapon or skill. Sakira's eyes glowed softly. I will remember these lessons and share with my people. Perhaps they will view humans, respect humans as I have learned. Eli smiled, understanding the profound significance of her words. This mission had been dangerous, unpredictable, and exhausting, but it had also shown what humans could do when guided by empathy and courage. The fact that Sakira had recognized this was a victory far greater than mere survival. The survey team's commander, Captain Rin, finally arrived for the debriefing. He had been monitoring the emergency signal and had prepared for their retrieval, but what he found was beyond his expectations. Sakira, once weak and frostbitten, now stood strong, confident, and observant. Eli shared the details of their journey, the storm, and Sakira's unprecedented actions. Her species would never share energy like that with outsiders, Eli explained. But she did, and in doing so, she changed the outcome for both of us. It's more than survival, it's a lesson in trust, courage, and understanding. Captain Rin studied Sakira carefully. So you're saying our human endurance, empathy, and willingness to act inspired her to take extraordinary measures, Eli nodded. Exactly. Humans endure because we choose to. We survive together for each other, and that choice can inspire even others with extraordinary abilities. Sakira stepped forward. I testify humans, remarkable, survive, not only by strength but by courage, trust, empathy for others. I have witnessed their endurance, and it is extraordinary. Your species deserves respect and recognition. The room was silent for a moment. The crew and even the commander felt the weight of her words. An outsider, a member of a species that had never fully respected humans, had recognized their greatest qualities, not weapons, technology, or speed, but choice, courage, and empathy. Captain Rin finally nodded. This changes things. It's not just a mission report, it's testimony. If Sakira's people hear this, they may see humans differently, perhaps even as equals in endurance and moral strength. Eli felt a quiet pride. He had survived countless missions, faced dangers that could kill an ordinary person, but this was different. Their survival and the trust they had built had created something far greater, a bridge between species, a recognition that humans were extraordinary not because of physical might, but because of the choices they made for others. Over the next few days, Sakira's recovery continued, and she shared more of her observations. I have never seen a species endure like this. Humans face harsh conditions not only with skill but with heart, with choice, with courage. I will carry this story to my people. They will understand humans in ways I never imagined. Eli listened, feeling a deep satisfaction. Their ordeal had been dangerous, exhausting, and unpredictable, but the lessons learned were invaluable. Humanity had endured, inspired trust, and earned recognition, not through force, but through empathy, courage, and the willingness to act for others. Finally, the survey team prepared to return to Earth's nearby outpost. Sakira accompanied them, her observations carefully recorded. Her testimony would become the first account of human endurance from an alien perspective, a story that would ripple across galaxies. You humans are remarkable, Sakira said quietly to Eli before leaving the ship for the shuttle. Your species survives because of heart, choice, courage, trust, not just strength, not weapons, not speed, but will to act for others. I will never forget this. Eli smiled, feeling a mixture of pride and humility. "And I'll never forget your courage either. You changed the outcome for both of us. That's something no one can take away." As the shuttle lifted from the survey ship, Eli watched the exomoon shrink below them. The frozen landscape, once harsh and unforgiving, now seemed like a stage for something greater. They had survived together, endured together, and learned from each other. And in doing so, they had proven something fundamental. Humanity's greatest strength lay not in technology or strength, but in the willingness to act for others, no matter the cost. Sakira looked back at him through the shuttle window, her eyes glowing faintly. Humans endure, inspire, survive because of courage, choice, empathy. I will carry this always. Eli gave a small wave, his heart filled with quiet pride. The exomoon, the storm, the frozen nights, all of it had led to this moment. Humanity had been seen through alien eyes, not as fragile or reckless, but as a species capable of extraordinary endurance and empathy. And Eli knew, without a doubt, that their story was only the beginning. The shuttle moved steadily through space, leaving the frozen exomoon behind. Below, the icy cliffs and vast snowfields disappeared into the distance, shrinking into a pale silver dot as the twin suns reflected off the ice one last time. Eli sat beside Sakira, the hum of the shuttle engines filling the silence. Both of them were exhausted, yet there was a quiet satisfaction in the air. They had survived the exomoon, endured the storm, and created something far greater than mere survival: trust, understanding, and the recognition of humanity's extraordinary resilience. Sakira watched the stars through the shuttle's viewport, her glowing eyes reflecting both curiosity and admiration. "Eli, humans, your species, remarkable," she said softly. "Not only survive harsh worlds, but endure because of choice, empathy, courage for others. I have never witnessed this among my people." Eli nodded. "Exactly. Humans survive not just because of strength or technology or skill, but because we choose to act for others. That choice, that willingness to help even when it's hard, is what makes us endure." She studied him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. "I understand now. Your species inspires trust, loyalty, courage even in outsiders like me. I will carry this lesson to my people. Perhaps they will respect humans as I have learned." Eli felt a quiet pride. The exomoon had been dangerous, unpredictable, and relentless, but it had shown something extraordinary: that humanity's greatest strength was not just in physical power, but in choice, empathy, and courage. And Sakira's recognition meant that these qualities would be understood beyond Earth, across the stars. The shuttle soon docked with the survey ship. Captain Rin awaited them, along with the rest of the team. Their faces reflected relief and curiosity, eager to hear about the events on the exomoon and Sakira's condition. Eli led her to the medical bay, where she could fully recover and stabilize her energy levels. "You did well," Captain Rin said to Eli. "And you," he gestured to Sakira, "have done something extraordinary. Your species and your actions could have far-reaching effects. You've demonstrated qualities many thought rare or insignificant in humans: courage, empathy, endurance beyond instinct." Sakira nodded slowly, still regaining strength. "I testify humans survive because of heart, courage, choice, trust, not just strength. I have witnessed this and I respect this. My people will hear of it." Eli felt a warmth in his chest. This was beyond recognition or awards. It was validation from an entirely different species, one that had never truly understood humanity before. He realized the events on the exomoon were no longer just a survival story. They were the beginning of a bridge between worlds. Over the following days, the survey ship traveled toward a galactic outpost near Earth. Sakira continued to recover, her glowing eyes dimming as her energy stabilized. She moved among the human crew with quiet confidence, observing, learning, and occasionally sharing insights about her species. Her respect for humanity was evident in every gesture, every word. One afternoon, as Eli walked with her through the ship's observation deck, she spoke quietly. "Eli, humans endure because you choose to. You act not for glory, not for reward, but for others. That is power greater than anything I have known." Eli nodded. "It's what we do. We survive together for each other. And sometimes that makes the difference between life and death. That's what saved both of us on the exomoon." Sakira tilted her head, considering his words. "I will tell my people that humans are extraordinary not only because of strength or skill, but because of heart, courage, and choice. Perhaps they will understand and respect humans as I have begun." Eli felt a sense of humility. It was one thing to survive, another to be recognized, but this recognition from an outsider species was far more meaningful. And maybe this will be the first step toward better understanding between our peoples. If your people see humans as we truly are, maybe there's hope for cooperation, not just conflict. Sakira's eyes glowed faintly. "Yes, hope is possible. I have seen your species endure, inspire, survive because of choice, empathy, courage. My people will learn of this and perhaps change perspective." The days passed, and soon the survey ship reached the outpost. Messages were sent to Earth and to Sakira's people, sharing the extraordinary events on the exomoon. Sakira's account highlighted not just survival, but humanity's capacity to endure through empathy and courage. Scientists, diplomats, and explorers across the galaxy would now view humans in a new light. Eli reflected on the journey. The exomoon had been harsh, unforgiving, and nearly deadly. Yet it had revealed something extraordinary about humanity: the ability to act for others, to endure beyond instinct, and to inspire trust and loyalty in even the most alien beings. That lesson, simple yet profound, was now being carried across the stars. Sakira joined him on the observation deck one final time before returning to her homeworld. "Eli, humans, remarkable. I will carry this story always. Your species survives not only by strength but by choice, courage, empathy for others. I am grateful for your trust and care." Eli smiled faintly. "And I'm grateful for yours. You taught me something too, about trust, about connection, and about how recognition from someone different can be as meaningful as survival itself." She nodded, her glow softening as the shuttle prepared to take her back to her people. "I will never forget humans or your courage, your choice, your heart. My people will know and perhaps respect humans as I do." The shuttle lifted, leaving the survey ship behind. Eli watched as Sakira disappeared into the stars, carrying with her a story of humanity that would ripple across galaxies. He felt a quiet pride, not for himself, but for humanity as a whole. Their species had been tested, endured, and recognized in ways that went beyond physical survival. In the weeks and months that followed, the account of Eli and Sakira's journey spread across interstellar communication networks. Scientists, explorers, and diplomats discussed the implications of Sakira's testimony. Humans were no longer seen simply as a fragile or isolated species. They were recognized as capable of extraordinary endurance, empathy, and courage, a species that survived not only because of skill or technology, but because of the willingness to act for others. Eli returned to his duties, quietly proud. The exomoon had tested him, pushed him to his limits, and forced him to trust and be trusted. But more than that, it had shown what humanity could truly be. And across the stars, that truth would now be known. One evening, as he stood on the observation deck, staring at the distant lights of his home planet, Eli reflected on the journey. The frozen exomoon had seemed impossible, harsh, and unforgiving. Yet it had revealed something deeper: that humanity's greatest strength was the choice to act, to endure, and to care for others, even in the most extreme circumstances. And in that moment, Eli knew one thing for certain: No matter what challenges lay ahead, whether on Earth, in space, or among the stars, humanity would endure, inspire, and survive, guided by courage, empathy, and the unwavering choice to act for the good of others. Sakira's journey back to her people would ensure that humans were no longer underestimated, no longer seen as fragile or insignificant. They would be recognized for what they truly were, a species capable of extraordinary endurance, courage, and moral strength. And Eli, looking out at the infinite expanse of space, felt the quiet satisfaction of knowing that he had been part of something far greater than himself, a story that would shape the perception of humanity across the galaxy, a story that began with simple acts of warmth, trust, and shared survival on a frozen exomoon. The stars stretched endlessly before him, but for the first time the universe seemed less vast and more connected. Humans had endured and they had inspired, and that was only the beginning.